So, Mr. Firebrand,
Can you stop with the formalities? I know it's part of the job, but we hang out when you're not working, and this is my fifth session? Four and a half? Whatever. Point is, it's not necessary.
okay, I guess I am getting a little predictable in starting a conversation. How can I help today?
Well, the whole holding yourself to too high of standards thing might have come back, and I want to make sure it's actually that. Have you given much thought about thought life?
Well, what do you mean by thought life?
Well, all the time we hear authority figures in our lives tell us to safeguard our actions, to always be careful about what we do or say because it can lead to serious consequences. But I think safeguarding your thoughts is just as important, and I don't see that being talked about as much. Our minds are the last safe haven from prying eyes or intruders. It's the only place you can really call your own, and no one can really know what's going on in there. You can think of anything without consequences. Except I don't think that's true. Thoughts and intentions do have power. They might not seem like it at first, but a single stray, idle thought can send your destiny spiraling in a completely different direction. That can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing too. I've known people who have let inconsequential, bitter feelings slowly grow into seething hate, or let tiny little breaches of character slowly get self justified more and more until their moral compass was completely gone. It wasn't something that happened immediately, it grew over time and started as a small, harmless thought. They didn't think it was a big deal at the time. I think this happens because we rationalize that because it's just a thought, it's not important. Honest question, am I being paranoid here?
I don't believe so. Regardless of how often we may tell ourselves that putting a specific thought or emotion into our minds over and over again really can't affect who we choose to be in the everyday, they can have very subtle changes in our behavior and how we react to those around us. I suppose it really depends on how long you keep dwelling on such ideas or feelings. May I ask what brought this on, Firebrand?
Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but all I'll say is recently I realized that I really don't have a lot of self control. It's hard for me to say no to myself or to say yes to important things. I let myself indulge in behaviors that seemed harmless at the time, but slowly I went further and further down. I kept breaching my own standards, ones that I, hypocritically, expected others to adhere to. I was able to catch myself eventually, but I look back on it and can't help but feel ashamed. I started thinking about how I ended up in that situation, and I came to the conclusion that we just discussed. Even for a while after that, I was severely tempted to indulge again in those behaviors. I didn't trust myself, and I was afraid I was going to fall again. I felt I had no choice but to remove the possibility of those temptations. Was that too far?
No, but removing such possibilities is only one helpful step towards a goal. It doesn't address why such a loss of self-control happened in the first place. And to be honest, for a great many bad habits which can develop for any number of reasons, removing access to that habit will only occasionally bring you back to who you want to be again. Far more important would be filling your time with a habit you can devote yourself to wholeheartedly and actually feel satisfied with the results. Far too often, a person dedicates him or herself to, say, a New Year's resolution of, "I'll never do such and such ever again," and quickly discover just how much of a strain they've put on their daily life because they didn't think about having something worthwhile and enjoyable to fill their time with instead.
I think I see where you're going with this. You're saying that to go all the way, I need to fixate my time on something better or purer to replace that bad habit. To prevent dark thoughts, think about good thoughts. But even then, couldn't that also be dangerous?
I think one just needs to change their perspective on how to deal with dark thoughts. Trying to prevent them from ever happening is a foolish endeavor and puts a far greater stress on both your mental and emotional state. Attempting to force them out of your mind tends to give far more of a reason for such thoughts to keep coming back. At the same time, you can't just ignore them, pretend they don't exist. Instead, you need to imagine as though your mind is like an office with two doors. Whenever a thought or feeling comes in that you'd rather not dwell on, you can choose to yell at it until it goes away, or choose to just keep working on whatever you're doing while that issue is standing there staring at you, or you treat it like something expected, and yet also trivial. Something to the effect of, "Ah yes, I've been expecting you. The exit is right over there." It's the kind of habit which takes some practice, but it will allow you to address a dark thought without dwelling on it. Fighting it off every time it shows up will be both stressful and exhausting. But you don't want to become complacent with its existence either. That's usually what starts a bad habit in the first place. In my opinion, you just need to treat it as something commonplace. Does that make sense to you, Firebrand?
Okay, I think I got it. Dwelling on a dark thought is dangerous in cases of both allowing it to stay and trying to get it to leave. So, we need to recognize its existence, but don't be so gung-ho about it going away. Be vigilant, but not paranoid. Be acknowledging, but not complacent. Alright, thanks for that, but that's not all I wanted to talk about. I also want to talk about how dwelling on good thoughts too much can also be dangerous. Like, have you ever noticed that when someone is aware of their virtues, when they become aware of the good that they do, those virtues and those goods become less formidable?
Makes sense. Someone who knows everything of what they are capable of, or at least thinks that they do, can quickly lose their desire to grow and improve, which in turn can cause their virtues to be far less worthwhile because they are no longer challenging themselves.
Humility especially. Oh heavens, humility. Once you're aware that you've become humble, it becomes very hard to remain that way. It's hard not to feel accomplished, or shall I say, proud of your humility. You end up thinking, by Jove, I am humble, and that leads you to no longer question yourself. My point is, how do we catch ourselves when we think something like that, especially when they disguise themselves so well as something good for you?
I suppose that really depends on what a person sees as being humble. Personally, I don't know whether I or really anyone will know for certain whether they fit that attitude. If a person says, "I am humble," you could make the argument that such a statement goes against the very definition of humility. Whereas one who asks him or herself, "Am I humble?" on a regular basis, consistently seeking out an answer and changing him or herself with the hope of perhaps one day figuring it out but never really reaching said destination, I believe that draws far closer to the true definition of humility. In essence, I'd say that humility starts with admitting weakness and continually finding ways to make those weak things become strong. Would you agree with that notion, Firebrand?
Yeah, you pretty much hit on every point. I suppose I just wanted some reassurance that choosing your thoughts carefully is just as important as choosing your actions or words carefully. There's that pesky little gremlin that occasionally appears. He likes to call me a stick in the mud, but I think I know how to deal with him a little better.
I hope there will be a bit less stress in your future, Firebrand. Just let me know if you're ever feeling overwhelmed.
Can do.
Please, gag.
What on...
No, I don't know why he has an Australian accent.
That was not what I was going to ask.
Come on, stop trying to better yourself. You're not as successful as others.
I'm doing alright, and I'm still having fun doing what I do.
Why do you insist on trying to achieve your dreams when they're so far out of your reach?
It's good to be helping.
Life ain't a race.
Pathetic. You won't even listen to the voice of reason.
Hey, I met Reason. He's green. You ain't Reason. You're a giant sissy.